My name is Andrea Williams, and at 67 years old, I thought I had seen it all during my career as an elementary school principal. Living in my Boston home of 40 years, I was excited for dinner at my son Thomas and his wife Jennifer to celebrate their first wedding anniversary. As I applied my lipstick, my phone buzzed. A text from my lawyer. "Call me immediately." My stomach dropped at the unusual urgency in Frank's message. I had no idea what he would tell me about my new daughter-in-law would change everything. Before I continue with what happened next, where are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments below, and please hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories like mine. When my husband James passed away 5 years ago, my world crumbled beneath my feet. He was not just my husband of 42 years, but my best friend and confidant. James was a beloved pediatrician in our community, respected by everyone who knew him. His practice had flourished over the decades, and he had touched countless lives with his gentle demeanor and medical expertise. We had built a comfortable life together, financially secure thanks to his medical career and my position as an elementary school principal. After James died, Thomas became my rock. At 35, my son had made me proud in every possible way. A brilliant software engineer working for a prestigious tech company, Thomas had inherited his father's analytical mind and my determination. We had always been close, but after James passed, our bond grew even stronger. Sunday dinners became our sacred tradition, and Thomas called me nearly every day, sometimes just to check in. I remember the spring day 14 months ago, when Thomas announced he wanted me to meet someone special. Her name was Jennifer, and the way his eyes lit up when he spoke about her told me everything I needed to know about his feelings. He brought her to Sunday dinner the following weekend. I still remember Jennifer walking through my front door, a vision in a simple blue dress, her blonde hair cascading past her shoulders in perfect waves. At 32, she was poised and articulate. A successful marketing executive for a national retail chain, she spoke confidently about her career achievements and seemed genuinely interested in my stories from decades in education. What struck me most about Jennifer was how attentive she was toward Thomas. The way she looked at him, gently touched his arm when he spoke, and remembered little details about his preferences. They seemed perfect together. When she mentioned she had been orphaned young and had no family of her own, my heart went out to her. I found myself hoping she might one day see me as the mother she had lost. Their romance moved quickly. Thomas called me 3 months after that first dinner to announce their engagement. I was caught off guard by the speed of it all. My son had always been methodical and cautious in relationships. In fact, James and I had sometimes worried he might be too cautious, too afraid of making a mistake. But with Jennifer, he threw caution to the wind. They married within 6 months of meeting. I had gently suggested they might want to wait a little longer, get to know each other better. But Thomas was adamant. He had found the love of his life, and he did not want to wait. I respected his decision, though a small, quiet voice in the back of my mind whispered concerns I could not quite articulate. The wedding was smaller than I had envisioned for my only child. Jennifer preferred an intimate ceremony with just closest friends and family. Since she had no family of her own, the guest list was predominantly our relatives and friends. I had insisted on covering most of the expenses, wanting to give them a beautiful start to their marriage. Jennifer had graciously accepted, though she took complete control of the planning, often making decisions without consulting Thomas or me. In the months following the wedding, I noticed subtle changes in Thomas. Our Sunday dinners became less frequent. His daily calls dwindled to occasional texts. When I did see him, he seemed slightly distracted, often checking his phone as if waiting for something important. Jennifer was always by his side, her arm linked possessively through his. Whenever I asked about Jennifer's past, hoping to know more about the woman who had stolen my son's heart, she would smile politely and redirect the conversation. I learned to stop asking. Thomas had mentioned once that her childhood had been difficult, and I assumed she preferred not to dwell on painful memories. Despite my lingering concerns, I was determined to be a supportive mother and mother-in-law. When their first wedding anniversary approached, I bought them an expensive piece of artwork I knew Thomas had admired at a local gallery. hoping to contribute something meaningful to their home. I was genuinely looking forward to celebrating with them, to seeing their home and sharing a special meal. On the evening of their anniversary dinner, I spent extra time getting ready. I chose my favorite navy blue dress, the one James had always loved, applied my makeup carefully, and put on the pearl necklace Thomas had given me for my 60th birthday. I wanted to look my best for the occasion. It was as I was sliding on my wedding ring, the last step in my preparation ritual, that my phone buzzed with Frank's text. Looking back, I realize now that was the exact moment my carefully constructed sense of security began to crumble, though I had no way of knowing it then. My hands trembled as I picked up my phone to call Frank Wilson. In 30 years of friendship and professional relationship, Frank had never sent me such an urgent message. As my family attorney and dear friend of both James and me, Frank had helped us through wills, property purchases, insurance claims, and even the occasional dispute with neighbors. But this text felt different, ominous. I sat down on the edge of my bed, took a deep breath, and dialed his number. He answered on the first ring. "Andrea, thank God you called back so quickly," Frank said, his voice tense. "Frank, what is going on?" I was just heading out to Thomas and Jennifer's for their anniversary dinner. There was a pause, the kind that falls before life-changing news. "Andrea, I think you should cancel that dinner. I have information about Jennifer that you and Thomas need to hear immediately." My heart started racing. What kind of information? The kind that suggests Jennifer is not who she claims to be. His words were measured, careful. "After our conversation at the Peterson barbecue last month, when you mentioned some concerns about your daughter-in-law, I took the liberty of having my colleague run a discreet background check. What he found was concerning enough that I hired a private investigator to dig deeper." I clutched the phone tighter. "Frank, you're scaring me. What did you find?" "Jennifer Thompson is not her real name, Andrea. According to our investigator, her birth name is Melissa Blackwell. She has used at least 3 other aliases in the past decade. She has been married at least 3 times before Thomas, always to wealthy men, and each marriage ended with the husband financially devastated." The room seemed to spin around me. I had to sit down. "There's a clear pattern," Frank continued. "She targets successful men with substantial assets, rushes them into marriage, and systematically drains their finances before disappearing. She has a record of financial fraud that spans multiple states, though she's managed to avoid prosecution so far." Images flashed through my mind. Jennifer's reluctance to discuss her past, the whirlwind romance, her insistence on a quick wedding. All the little warning signs I had dismissed out of respect for my son's choices, now aligned into a horrifying picture. What about her background? The marketing career? Being an orphan? My voice sounded strange to my own ears. "All fabricated," Frank replied grimly. "She has no marketing degree or employment history with the companies she claimed to work for. And far from being an orphan, she has living parents in Arizona who have not heard from her in years. They reported her missing at one point, but eventually gave up when they learned she had chosen to cut ties with them." I thought about the expensive new car Thomas had bought shortly after the wedding, the lavish vacation they took to the Maldives, the new house they had purchased in an exclusive neighborhood. Thomas had good income, but these expenditures seemed excessive even for him. Had Jennifer been pushing for these purchases? "Frank, I have to warn Thomas immediately," I said, already reaching for my car keys. "Wait, Andrea," Frank cautioned. "We need to approach this carefully. Jennifer is sophisticated and manipulative. If she realizes we're onto her, she might accelerate whatever plan she has in motion. From what our investigator found, she's likely already transferred significant funds from Thomas's accounts." I felt physically ill. How did we miss this? How did she pass a background check for their mortgage? For her job? "She's expert at creating false documentation," Frank explained, "and she times her moves carefully, staying ahead of records catching up with her." The investigator said she's one of the most sophisticated identity frauds he's encountered. My mind raced back to subtle warning signs I had dismissed. Jennifer's reluctance to be photographed at family gatherings, her vague explanations about her previous life in Chicago, her lack of long-term friends, how she carefully steered conversations away from her past. Then there was the strange incident at Christmas when my sister Margaret mentioned knowing someone at the marketing firm where Jennifer claimed to work. Jennifer had quickly changed the subject and later made an excuse for them to leave early. I had thought nothing of it at the time. "I have to go to dinner," I said finally, making a decision. "If I cancel suddenly, she'll be suspicious. This way, I can see Thomas, maybe get him alone for a moment to warn him." Frank disagreed strongly. "Andrea, this is too dangerous. We should involve the police. Approach Thomas when Jennifer isn't present." "She's never not present these days," I said bitterly, realizing just how effectively Jennifer had isolated my son. "Besides, I need to see for myself. I need to look her in the eyes, knowing what I know now." After extracting a promise from me that I would not confront Jennifer directly and would call him immediately after dinner, Frank reluctantly agreed. He would compile all the evidence and meet me tomorrow morning with the private investigator. I hung up and sat motionless for several minutes, my mind replaying every interaction with Jennifer over the past 14 months. How had I missed it? The warning bells had been there, subtle but present. I had ignored them, wanting so badly for Thomas to be happy. Somehow, I pulled myself together. I applied another coat of lipstick to my trembling lips, straightened my dress, and practiced a neutral expression in the mirror. Tonight, I would have to give the performance of my life. I would need to sit across the table from the woman who was systematically destroying my son's life and pretend I knew nothing. As I drove to their house, my thoughts were chaos. Should I try to get Thomas alone? What if he didn't believe me? What if Jennifer somehow suspected what I knew? Most frightening of all, what if Thomas already knew something was wrong but was too ashamed to admit it or too frightened to leave? By the time I pulled into their driveway, my knuckles were white from gripping the steering wheel. Their new house loomed before me, a beautiful, colonial-style home that now seemed like a facade hiding something sinister. I took a deep breath, grabbed the carefully wrapped anniversary present from the passenger seat, and walked to the front door with a smile fixed firmly on my face. Thomas and Jennifer's house stood imposing against the darkening sky, its manicured lawn and perfect landscaping reminiscent of a magazine spread rather than a lived-in home. I had only visited twice since they moved in 3 months ago, Jennifer always having some excuse why the timing wasn't right for more frequent visits. I rang the doorbell, clutching my purse tightly against my side, trying to steady my breathing. Jennifer opened the door with a wide smile that now seemed practiced rather than genuine. "Andrea, you're right on time." She leaned in to kiss my cheek, her expensive perfume enveloping me. "You look absolutely wonderful. That dress brings out your eyes." Thomas appeared behind her, and my heart clenched. My son looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes that his smile couldn't disguise. Had he lost weight? His cheekbones seemed more pronounced than when I'd last seen him. "Hi, Mom," he said, giving me a warm but brief hug. "Thanks for coming over to celebrate with us." As Jennifer took my coat, I glanced around their foyer, noticing several new items since my last visit just 3 weeks ago. An ornate mirror in an antique gold frame hung on the wall, alongside what looked like an original oil painting. On a side table sat a crystal vase that I recognized as a piece from an exclusive designer whose work I had admired but could never justify purchasing. "Your home looks lovely," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "You've added some beautiful pieces." Jennifer beamed. "Thomas has been so generous. He knows how much I appreciate quality artisan work." I caught a flicker of something in Thomas's expression, too quick to interpret. Unease? Worry? He quickly suggested we move to the living room for pre-dinner drinks. The living room had transformed as well, with new furniture replacing the modest pieces they had purchased when first moving in. Everything spoke of luxury and significant expense. "What can I get you to drink, Mom?" Thomas asked, moving to an elaborate bar cart that was definitely new. "Just a small white wine, please. I needed to keep my wits sharp tonight." Jennifer dominated the conversation as Thomas prepared drinks, talking rapidly about a charity gala they had attended the previous weekend. name-dropping several prominent business figures who had supposedly been impressed with her marketing insights. I watched Thomas as he handed me my wine. His movements seemed mechanical, his smile not reaching his eyes. When he sat beside Jennifer on the sofa, she immediately placed her hand on his thigh, a gesture that seemed possessive rather than affectionate. "Thomas has been working so hard lately," Jennifer said, patting his leg. "I keep telling him he should ask for a raise, considering how much value he brings to the company." Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "We've been through this, Jen. The timing isn't right with the economy the way it is." "Nonsense," she countered. "They would be lost without you. They should recognize that financially." She turned to me with a conspiratorial smile. "Men sometimes need a push to recognize their true worth, don't they, Andrea?" I managed a non-committal response, noting how Thomas withdrew slightly from the conversation. This dynamic between them was new and troubling. As we moved to the dining room, I noticed a stack of papers on a desk in the adjoining study. Credit card statements, from the glimpse I caught, with several pages flagged with sticky notes. Thomas quickly closed the study door when he saw me looking, but not before I recognized the logo of a credit card company I hadn't known Thomas used. Dinner was a beautifully presented 3-course meal that Jennifer claimed to have prepared herself, though I recognized the distinctive style and packaging of an exclusive catering company when I helped bring dishes from the kitchen. Small lies, but they accumulated in my mind, reinforcing Frank's revelations. Throughout the meal, I watched Jennifer carefully. With my new awareness, her manipulative tactics became glaringly obvious. She subtly undermined Thomas's opinions, finished his sentences, and redirected any question I asked him directly. She controlled the narrative completely. "Jennifer, you mentioned growing up in Seattle last time we spoke," I said during a pause in conversation, deliberately contradicting the Chicago backstory she had originally shared. "What neighborhood did your family live in?" "I have a cousin there I've been meaning to visit." A flash of something, almost too quick to catch, crossed her face. "Oh, I lived in several places growing up. Foster care, you know, but mostly in the Ballard area, though it's changed completely now. Not worth visiting, really." Thomas looked confused for a moment, but said nothing. Had he noticed the discrepancy? "Excuse me for a moment," I said, needing a brief respite from the performance I was maintaining. "Where's your powder room again?" Instead of using the guest bathroom near the dining room, I deliberately went upstairs, wanting to see more of the house. In the master bathroom, I quickly opened the medicine cabinet, my heart racing at this invasion of privacy that felt necessary under the circumstances. What I found disturbed me deeply. Several prescription bottles with Thomas's name, lorazepam, a sleep aid, and another I recognized as an anti-anxiety medication. My son had never suffered from anxiety or sleep issues before. Next to these sat a pill organizer with compartments that had been filled with various medications. Was Jennifer medicating my son? I returned downstairs, my mind racing but my face composed. Back at the dinner table, the conversation had shifted to future plans. "We're thinking of investing in a vacation property," Jennifer announced. "There's a wonderful opportunity in Panama that one of my clients mentioned." "Panama?" I couldn't hide my surprise. Thomas had always talked about wanting a small cabin in the New Hampshire mountains someday. That's quite far. "It's an incredible investment opportunity," Jennifer continued enthusiastically. "Limited availability, so we need to move quickly." Thomas was a little hesitant at first, "But he's coming around, aren't you, honey?" Thomas nodded without meeting my eyes. "The numbers make sense," he said quietly. "High return potential." The evening continued with the exchange of anniversary gifts. I presented the artwork I had carefully selected, a piece by a local artist Thomas had admired at a gallery showing we had attended together the previous year. "Mom, this is..." "Wow," Thomas said, genuine emotion breaking through his subdued demeanor. "I can't believe you remembered how much I loved this piece." Jennifer examined it with a critical eye. "It's very unique," she said, in a tone that suggested this wasn't a compliment. "We'll have to find just the right spot for it." Her gift to Thomas was an expensive watch, presented with a flourish and detailed explanation of its exclusivity and status value. Thomas thanked her politely but without the enthusiasm one might expect for such an extravagant present. Her gift seemed impersonal, selected for appearance rather than meaning. As Jennifer began clearing dishes, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and her expression changed subtly. "I need to take this," she said, stepping into the other room. "Work emergency." In her brief absence, I seized the opportunity to connect with Thomas. "Honey, you look exhausted," I said gently. "Is everything okay?" A flash of vulnerability crossed his face. "It's just been a lot lately, Mom. New house, new responsibilities at work, trying to keep up with everything." He rubbed his temples. "Sometimes I feel a little overwhelmed with all the financial pressures." "What financial pressures?" I asked carefully. "I thought you were doing well at work?" I am," he backpedaled quickly. "It's just, the mortgage on this place is substantial, and Jennifer has big dreams for us." Before I could probe further, Jennifer returned, her manner brisk. "Sorry about that interruption. Client crisis averted." She smiled tightly. "Unfortunately, I'm getting one of my migraines. Thomas, honey, would you mind if we wrapped up early tonight?" Thomas immediately shifted to concern. "Of course. Do you need your medication?" The abrupt end to the evening felt orchestrated, particularly when I attempted to help clean up, and Jennifer insisted it wasn't necessary. I hugged my son tightly at the door, fighting the urge to pull him out of the house with me. "Call me tomorrow?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Sure, Mom," he replied, but I could tell it was just politeness. Jennifer stood beside him, her arm wrapped around his waist, a portrait of the devoted wife with a migraine who still managed to see her mother-in-law out properly. As I drove home, my suspicions had solidified into certainty. Everything Frank had told me aligned with what I had observed tonight. Jennifer was methodically controlling and isolating my son, while spending his money at an alarming rate. Whatever her ultimate plan was, I needed to act quickly to protect Thomas. I called Frank from my car. "I'll see you first thing tomorrow morning," I said grimly. "Bring everything you have. We need to move fast." At precisely 8 the next morning, I opened my front door to find Frank and a serious-looking man in his 50s standing on my porch. Frank made quick introductions as we moved to my dining room table. "This is Michael Dawson, the private investigator I mentioned," Frank said. "He's specialized in fraud and identity theft cases for 20 years. Michael nodded professionally as he set a thick folder on the table. "Mrs. Williams, I want to prepare you. What we've uncovered about your daughter-in-law is disturbing." For the next hour, they methodically laid out their findings, each revelation more shocking than the last. Photographs, documents, financial records, and police reports created a comprehensive picture of the woman my son had married. "Her real name is Melissa Blackwell," Michael explained, sliding across a copy of a birth certificate. "Born in Tucson, Arizona 40 years ago. Not 32 as she claims." I stared at the document, trying to reconcile the birth date with Jennifer's youthful appearance. "She's been lying about her age too?" "Cosmetic procedures," Michael said matter-of-factly, producing before and after photos that showed a subtly but definitely altered appearance. "She's invested significantly in maintaining a younger look." Frank gently pushed forward several marriage certificates. "She's been married 3 times before Thomas, all to wealthy professional men. The first when she was 25 to a surgeon in California. The second at 30 to a financial advisor in Colorado. The third at 35 to an architect in Washington state. Each certificate showed different names. Melissa Blackwell, Lisa Bennett, Jessica Brooks, and finally, Jennifer Thompson. "What happened to these marriages?" I asked, dreading the answer. Michael's expression grew grave. "They followed a nearly identical pattern. Quick courtship, lavish wedding, then systematic financial extraction. She gradually took control of their accounts, convinced them to make risky investments, opened joint credit lines, and eventually emptied everything before disappearing." He slid across police reports and newspaper clippings. 2 of the men filed fraud charges but eventually dropped them, likely out of embarrassment. The third, the architect, committed suicide after being left with over $2 million in debt. His family tried to pursue charges against her, but she had vanished by then. My hand flew to my mouth. Oh my God. Frank placed his hand over mine. Andrea, there's more. Michael has uncovered evidence that she's already begun transferring funds from Thomas's accounts. Michael produced bank statements that he had somehow obtained. In the last 4 months, nearly $400,000 has moved from your son's accounts to offshore entities. There are also 3 new credit accounts opened in his name with nearly maxed out limits. I thought about the extravagant furnishings in their home, the expensive watch, the supposedly lucrative investment opportunity in Panama. She's been convincing Thomas to make withdrawals from his retirement accounts as well, Michael continued. There are substantial penalties for early withdrawal, but the funds have been flowing out steadily. Frank looked pained. Andrea, we also found something concerning that directly involves you. Melissa, or Jennifer, has been making inquiries about your late husband's medical practice assets and your own retirement accounts. I felt a chill run through me. How could she access information about our finances? She's extremely skilled at social engineering, Michael explained. She can extract information from banks, investment firms, even government agencies by using personal details she gathers. And she's likely had access to any paperwork Thomas might have about family finances. I remembered the many times Thomas and I had discussed financial matters after James died, his help in organizing my affairs, the copies of important documents he kept in case of emergency. What do we do now? I asked, my voice hardly above a whisper. Frank straightened in his chair. We need to talk to Thomas immediately, show him what we've found. Then we contact the authorities. There are pending investigations in 2 states that would be very interested in Melissa Blackwell's current location. Michael suggested we call Thomas to a meeting at Frank's office, presenting it as a routine discussion about estate planning to avoid alerting Jennifer. I made the call immediately, but Thomas's response left me cold. Estate planning? Now? He sounded irritated. Mom, I'm swamped at work. Jennifer and I are fine. We don't need to review anything. Please, Thomas, I pleaded. It's important. Just an hour of your time. After much persuasion, he reluctantly agreed to meet us at Frank's office that afternoon. When he arrived, his expression was impatient, his manner defensive before we had even spoken. Frank carefully began presenting the evidence, but Thomas's face hardened with each document placed before him. What is this? He demanded. You hired a private investigator to look into my wife? Without my knowledge or consent? Thomas, please, I begged. Just look at the evidence. Evidence? He exploded, standing abruptly. This is invasion of privacy. This is you not being able to let go and let me live my own life. Frank attempted to intervene. Thomas, as your family lawyer, I have a fiduciary duty to warn you when I see potential fraud that could affect your assets. My assets are none of your business, Thomas shouted, his face flushed with anger. And you, he turned to me, his expression one I had never seen directed at me before. You've never liked Jennifer. You've always been jealous of her, of the attention I give her instead of you. The accusation struck like a physical blow. Thomas, that's not true. I only want to protect you. I don't need your protection, he seethed. I'm a grown man. Jennifer loves me. She supports my dreams, unlike you who always wanted me to play it safe, to live the life you and Dad planned out. I was stunned into silence by the unfairness of his words. We have financial records showing funds being transferred out of your accounts, Michael said calmly. Credit cards opened in your name. We manage our finances together, Thomas snapped. Those are legitimate investments and expenditures we've agreed upon. He gathered his coat. I'm not listening to another word of this. Stay out of my life, all of you. As he stormed toward the door, I made one final desperate attempt. Thomas, please. She's not who you think she is. She's done this before. He paused at the door, his back to me. Don't call me. Don't come to the house. When you're ready to apologize to Jennifer and me, maybe we can talk. The door slammed behind him, leaving me collapsing into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Frank placed a comforting hand on my shoulder, but no words could ease the pain of my son's rejection. For a week, I heard nothing from Thomas despite my multiple calls and texts. Each one went unanswered. I drove by their house twice, but the curtains were drawn, and no one answered the door. My sleep was fitful, filled with nightmares of Thomas in danger while I stood helplessly by. In desperation, I asked Michael to maintain surveillance on the house, needing at least to know that Thomas was safe. His reports provided cold comfort. Thomas left for work each morning and returned each evening, his routine apparently normal. But Michael also observed something troubling. While Thomas was at work, Jennifer received multiple male visitors to the house. Men who stayed for approximately an hour each. They appear to be business associates of some kind, Michael reported. They bring documents, discuss something with her, then leave. Even more disturbing was Michael's discovery that Jennifer had somehow accessed records from my late husband's medical practice. A contact at the medical records office confirmed that someone claiming to be Dr. Williams's daughter had requested copies of certain patient files and financial statements. "She's expanding her search," Frank said grimly when I reported this to him. "This isn't just about Thomas anymore. She's looking for additional assets to target." The realization that Jennifer's scheme might be larger and more complex than we initially thought sent a new wave of fear through me. She wasn't just after Thomas's money. She was investigating every possible avenue to exploit our family's resources. 3 days after the disastrous meeting at Frank's office, I was sitting in my kitchen staring blankly at a cup of tea when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Jennifer standing on my porch, wearing an expression of concern that seemed carefully constructed. "Andrea," she said softly, "may I come in? I think we need to talk." My heart raced, but I kept my face neutral as I stepped aside to let her enter. I had not expected a direct confrontation but had mentally prepared for this possibility. Following Frank's advice, I had activated the recording app on my phone, which now sat in my pocket. "Would you like some tea?" I asked, matching her pleasant tone as we moved to the living room. "No, thank you," she replied, seating herself elegantly on my sofa. "I won't take much of your time. I just wanted to clear the air about this unfortunate misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" I echoed, taking the armchair across from her. Jennifer sighed dramatically. "Thomas told me about the meeting with the lawyer. About the ridiculous accusations and the so-called investigation." She leaned forward, her expression now sympathetic. "Andrea, I understand. Really, I do. It must have been so difficult losing James, and then feeling like you're losing Thomas too." I remained silent, watching her perform this rehearsed scene. "I know what it's like to fear being alone," she continued. "But creating these conspiracy theories about me isn't the way to keep Thomas in your life. In fact, it's pushing him away." "Is that what Thomas thinks?" I asked carefully. "That I've invented concerns about you because I'm afraid of being alone?" "He's hurt," she said, confused. "He doesn't understand why his mother would try to destroy his marriage." She paused delicately. "But I told him I'm sure you meant well. That perhaps it's just a difficult adjustment period for you." "How generous of you," I said, unable to keep a hint of sarcasm from my voice. If she noticed, she didn't show it. "I'm here to offer an olive branch, Andrea, for Thomas's sake. He's devastated by this rift with you." "Is he? Then why hasn't he returned my calls?" A flash of irritation crossed her face before she composed herself. "He needs time. But I suggested that perhaps we women could work this out between ourselves, mother to daughter-in-law." "And how do you propose we do that?" Jennifer's demeanor shifted subtly. "Simple. You call off your investigator, who, by the way, isn't nearly as discreet as he thinks he is. You tell Thomas you made a terrible mistake, that your grief and loneliness led you to irrational suspicions. And we all move forward as a family." I studied her face, looking for any sign of the real woman beneath the mask. "And if I don't agree to this arrangement?" Something cold entered her eyes, though her smile remained fixed. "Then I'm afraid Thomas will have to make a difficult choice. And given his current feelings, I think we both know who he'll choose." I took a deep breath. "Jennifer, or should I call you Melissa? Or perhaps Lisa? Or Jessica? The change in her expression was instantaneous and chilling. The mask of concerned daughter-in-law vanished, replaced by calculating assessment. She recovered quickly, letting out a small laugh. I see the investigator has been filling your head with nonsense. Probably charging you a fortune for these wild stories. 3 ex-husbands would disagree that they're just stories, I said steadily. Especially the family of the one who took his own life after you destroyed him financially. Jennifer's facade cracked completely then. She sat back, a new expression taking over her features, one of cold evaluation. You have no proof that would stand up in court, she said flatly. And Thomas won't believe you. I've made sure of that. The medication, I said. You've been drugging him, haven't you? The anxiety medication, the sleeping pills? She smiled slightly. Thomas has been under tremendous stress. His doctor prescribed appropriate medication to help him cope. If he sometimes needs a little extra to help him sleep soundly. That's between husband and wife, isn't it? The casual way she admitted to medicating my son without his knowledge sent rage coursing through me, but I forced myself to remain calm. What do you really want? I asked. Why are you here? Jennifer crossed her legs, suddenly businesslike. Let's be practical, Andrea. This can go one of 2 ways. You can continue this pointless crusade, further alienating Thomas and causing him pain. Or we can come to an arrangement that benefits everyone. What kind of arrangement? Financial? She said simply. You have substantial resources. Your husband's medical practice assets, your home, your investments. Your what, late 60s? How much do you really need for the rest of your life? I stared at her, appalled by her audacity. You're asking me to pay you? I'm offering you the chance to help your son, she countered smoothly. You provide a generous settlement to me, and I leave Thomas with minimal damage. He'll be hurt initially, of course, but much better off in the long run. No lengthy divorce, no further draining of his accounts. You'd just walk away, just like that? For the right price, she confirmed. Say, $2 million. Half now, half when the divorce is final. Everyone wins. You get your son back. Thomas keeps most of his assets, and I move on to other opportunities. I struggled to control my expression, to not reveal my disgust and anger. And if I refuse? Jennifer's smile disappeared completely. Then I take everything. Every last cent Thomas has or will ever have. I'll max out every credit line, mortgage every asset, and leave him so deeply in debt he'll never recover. And I'll make sure he blames you for it. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. You have 48 hours to decide. We'll be making some significant financial moves by then that can't be undone. Think of it as the price of your son's freedom and future happiness. As she walked to the door, she turned back with one final threat. Oh, and Andrea? If you contact the police or try to warn Thomas directly, I'll make sure he suffers consequences far beyond financial ruin. I have resources and connections you can't imagine. The moment her car pulled away from the curb, I frantically dialed Thomas's number. Straight to voicemail, as I expected. I left a message anyway, trying to keep my voice calm. Thomas, it's Mom. Please call me as soon as you get this. It's urgent, honey. It's about Jennifer. Please call me back. I tried his work number next, only to be told by his assistant that he had taken a few days of personal leave and wasn't expected in the office until next week. This was alarming, as Thomas rarely took time off work. Frantic with worry, I drove directly to their house, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. No one answered my repeated knocking. Thomas's car wasn't in the driveway. The house had a deserted feel to it, curtains drawn tight against the windows. I called Frank from my car. She came to see me, I said without preamble. She threatened Thomas and tried to extort money from me. And now I can't find Thomas. He's not at work, not at home, not answering his phone. I'm calling the police, Frank said decisively. We have enough now with the recording and her direct threats to get them involved. Within hours, we were sitting in the local police station with a detective who specialized in fraud cases. After listening to the recording and reviewing the evidence Michael had gathered, She agreed the situation warranted immediate investigation. We'll put out an alert for both Thomas Williams and Jennifer Thompson, also known as Melissa Blackwell, the detective assured us. And I'm contacting the Financial Crimes Division to look into the accounts immediately. But when they ran a check on Thomas's credit cards and bank accounts, the news was grim. His checking and savings accounts had been emptied. His credit cards were maxed out. 2 new loans had been taken out in his name in the past 48 hours. She's not just targeting Thomas anymore, the detective said grimly after making some calls. We're seeing attempts to access your accounts as well, Mrs. Williams. And there appear to be loan applications submitted with your information as co-signer. The scope of Jennifer's fraud was breathtaking. She had attempted to use my identity, Thomas's identity, and even attempted to access funds from James's old medical practice by claiming to be an authorized representative. We need to find Thomas, I said, my voice breaking with fear. She threatened him. What if she's done something to him? The police issued a missing persons report for Thomas. News of Jennifer's fraud scheme began appearing in local media, which unexpectedly brought forward 2 previous victims who had seen the reports and recognized her photo. For 3 agonizing days, we heard nothing. I barely slept, jumping at every phone ring, imagining the worst possible scenarios. Then, at 2 in the morning on the 4th day, I received a call from a hospital in a neighboring state. Mrs. Williams, this is Mercy General Hospital in Hartford. We have your son, Thomas Williams, in our care. He's listed you as his emergency contact. I drove through the night, my mind racing with terrible possibilities. The hospital had provided minimal information over the phone, only that Thomas was stable but had been admitted in serious condition. Frank insisted on accompanying me, concerned about my state of mind and the late-hour drive. When we arrived at Mercy General, a sympathetic nurse led us to the intensive care unit where Thomas lay connected to monitors, his face pale against the hospital sheets. A doctor met us in the hallway before we entered. Mrs. Williams, I'm Dr. Keller. Your son was found unconscious in a hotel room by housekeeping staff. He had a significant amount of benzodiazepines and alcohol in his system. If he hadn't been found when he was, the outcome could have been much worse. Was it a suicide attempt? I asked, my voice barely audible. We're not certain, Dr. Keller replied carefully. The combination and amount of substances suggest it could have been, but it's also possible he was over-medicated or unaware of the interaction effects. I thought of the prescription bottles I had seen in their bathroom, how Jennifer had mentioned giving Thomas a little extra to help him sleep. He's been asking for you since he regained consciousness, the doctor continued. You can go in now, but please keep the visit brief. He needs rest. Thomas looked smaller somehow against the white hospital linens, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since he was a child. His eyes fluttered open as I approached, filling with tears when he saw me. Mom, he whispered, his voice raspy. I'm so sorry. I took his hand, careful of the IV line. Shh, don't worry about that now. Just focus on getting better. She's gone, he said, a tear sliding down his cheek. Jennifer's gone. She took everything. I know, honey, I said gently. The police are looking for her. Thomas closed his eyes briefly, gathering strength. I didn't try to kill myself, Mom. I need you to know that. She'd been giving me pills for weeks, saying they were for anxiety. That night, she made me a drink, said we should celebrate a new investment opportunity. The next thing I remember is waking up here. A cold fury swept through me at the confirmation that Jennifer had deliberately drugged my son, perhaps with the intention of staging his suicide after emptying his accounts. I kept my expression calm for Thomas's sake. I didn't believe you, he continued, his voice breaking. I was so cruel to you, and you were right all along. You couldn't have known, I assured him, stroking his hair as I had when he was small. She was an expert at manipulation. This wasn't your fault. Over the next few days, as Thomas recovered physically, the full extent of Jennifer's deception emerged. She had been systematically medicating him for months, starting with small doses in his food or drinks, gradually increasing to levels that kept him compliant and confused. His personality changes, mood swings, and fatigue had all been symptoms of the drug she was administering without his knowledge. At first, I thought it was work stress, Thomas explained when he was stronger. When I mentioned feeling anxious, Jennifer suggested I see a doctor. She came with me, described my symptoms. The doctor prescribed a mild anti-anxiety medication, but Jennifer had supplemented the prescription with higher doses, adding sleeping medication at night. In his drugged state, Thomas had signed whatever documents she placed before him, authorized transfers he couldn't later recall, and agreed to investments he didn't understand. Frank met with us at the hospital, bringing disturbing financial news. "Thomas, I've been working with the fraud division at your bank. The picture isn't good. Your checking and savings accounts have been completely emptied. Your investment portfolio has been liquidated. There are 3 new credit cards maxed out in your name, and 2 personal loans totaling $300,000. Thomas looked devastated but not surprised. I knew it would be bad. Every time I questioned any expense or investment, she had a reasonable explanation. When I tried to check our accounts myself, I couldn't access them. She said she'd changed the passwords for security after noticing some suspicious activity. The most heartbreaking revelation came when Thomas admitted Jennifer had convinced him his mother was suffering from early dementia, explaining away any concerns I had raised as confusion or memory problems. She showed me articles about how to recognize signs of cognitive decline, pointed out inconsistencies in things you said. I was terrified of losing you the way we lost Dad, and she used that fear against me. When Thomas was discharged from the hospital, I brought him home to stay with me. His own house was essentially a crime scene, with police forensic accountants going through documents Jennifer had left behind. They discovered notebooks with detailed information about not only Thomas's finances but mine as well, along with what appeared to be a list of future targets, other wealthy men she had researched. The first weeks of recovery were brutal. Thomas alternated between crushing depression and searing anger. He refused therapy initially, ashamed and humiliated by what had happened. "How could I have been so stupid?" he would ask repeatedly. "I'm an engineer. I'm supposed to be analytical, careful." She was a professional con artist, I reminded him. She knew exactly which buttons to push, which vulnerabilities to exploit. We learned from the detective handling the case that Jennifer had fled to the Cayman Islands 2 days before Thomas was found in the hotel room. She had withdrawn the maximum amount from his accounts and transferred other funds to offshore entities that would be difficult to trace. "She's done this before," the detective explained. "But this is the most extensive case we've documented. With the evidence we have now, including her recorded threats to you and the testimony from previous victims who've come forward, we have enough for multiple federal charges. We're working with international authorities to locate and extradite her." Thomas hit rock bottom about 3 weeks after coming home. I found him sitting in the dark in his old bedroom, staring at wedding photos on his phone. "I loved her," he said, his voice hollow. "Or I thought I did. Was any of it real? Did she ever care at all?" I sat beside him, at a loss for words that could ease this particular pain. "I should have seen it," he continued. "There were so many red flags. The way she isolated me from friends, her vagueness about her past, how she always had a reason why I shouldn't talk to you about our finances." He looked at me, his eyes filled with despair. "I let her turn me against you. My own mother. You were being poisoned, Thomas. Literally and figuratively. No one thinks clearly under those circumstances. That night marked a turning point. Thomas finally agreed to see a therapist specializing in trauma and psychological manipulation. He also began attending a support group for victims of similar fraud schemes, discovering he was far from alone in being deceived by someone he trusted. The police investigation continued, with international authorities tracking Jennifer's movements. Her escape had been well planned, but she had made one critical mistake. The notebook she had left behind contained information about her entire operation, including contacts, future targets, and details of her previous identities. This evidence proved invaluable not only for building the case against her but for helping other potential victims. She never expected anyone to find that notebook, the detective told us. It was hidden in a false bottom of a drawer, If we hadn't been specifically looking for documentation of her fraud, it might never have been discovered. Gradually, Thomas began to heal. Working with financial advisors, he started the long process of rebuilding his credit and untangling the financial mess Jennifer had created. Some of the fraudulent loans were forgiven when the banks recognized they had been obtained through identity theft. The credit card companies reduced some of the charges after reviewing evidence of fraud. The breakthrough came when international authorities located Jennifer in the Cayman Islands and took her into custody. The news brought a complex mix of emotions for Thomas. Relief mingled with renewed pain at having to eventually face her in court. "I need to see this through," he told me the evening we received the news. "Not just for me, but for her other victims. And to make sure she can't do this to anyone else." That night, for the first time since the ordeal began, Thomas broke down completely, sobbing in my arms like he had as a child after a nightmare. Only this time, the nightmare had been real. But as I held my son, I felt something shift within him, the first genuine release of the shame and anger that had been consuming him. "We're going to get through this," I promised him. Together. 6 months after Jennifer's arrest, we sat in a federal courtroom watching as she was sentenced to 12 years in prison for fraud, identity theft, and extortion. The evidence against her was overwhelming, with testimony from multiple victims, including Thomas. 5 previous husbands had eventually been located, each with a similar story of financial and emotional devastation. Thomas sat straight-backed beside me throughout the proceedings, his face composed even when Jennifer occasionally glanced in his direction. She looked different now, her glamorous appearance faded by months in custody, the careful mask she had worn completely gone. "How do you feel?" I asked him as we left the courthouse. "Relieved," he said thoughtfully. "Not happy exactly, but like a chapter has closed. I can move forward now." And move forward he did. The Thomas who emerged from this ordeal was different from the son I had known before. In some ways stronger, in others more vulnerable, but ultimately more authentic. Through his support group, Thomas had met others who truly understood his experience. One of them, a woman named Sophia, who had been targeted by a male con artist in a similar scheme, became a particularly good friend. Their shared experience created a foundation of understanding and trust that developed gradually into something more. Unlike his whirlwind romance with Jennifer, this relationship progressed slowly, thoughtfully, with open communication. When Thomas eventually introduced Sophia to me, I saw immediately the difference in their dynamic. There was mutual respect, healthy boundaries, and genuine affection rather than the intense, consuming passion Jennifer had manufactured. And while my protective instincts prompted me to discreetly look into Sophia's background, I found exactly what she had claimed: a 4th-grade teacher with a transparent life history. Financially, recovery was a longer road. Thomas had lost nearly 70% of his assets to Jennifer's scheme. The legal system managed to recover some funds from frozen accounts, but much had been spent or hidden beyond recovery. Thomas approached this challenge with remarkable resilience, downsizing his lifestyle and focusing on rebuilding gradually, rather than trying to immediately replace what was lost. Most importantly, Thomas found purpose in his experience. He started a foundation, providing resources and support for romance scam survivors, particularly targeting older adults and financially successful professionals who often suffered in silence due to shame. His technical background proved valuable, as he developed educational programs about recognizing the warning signs of such scams and protecting personal information. "If I can help even one person avoid what happened to me," he told me, "then something positive will have come from this nightmare." For my part, I learned profound lessons about balancing protection with respect. I had seen warning signs with Jennifer but had hesitated to intervene too forcefully, wanting to respect Thomas's independence as an adult. Finding the right balance between protective concern and respectful distance remains a challenge for any parent of an adult child. But I now understood that open, honest communication was always the best approach, even when the conversations might be difficult. We also implemented practical safeguards within our family. Thomas and I had frank discussions about finances that we had previously avoided. We established emergency protocols and regular check-ins about major financial decisions, not from a place of mistrust, but as a practical recognition that two perspectives are better than one. My relationship with Thomas deepened through our shared trauma and recovery. The artificial distance Jennifer had created between us dissolved, replaced by a more mature, honest connection. We could discuss difficult topics, acknowledge mistakes, and support each other's independence while remaining connected. Perhaps the most profound change was in how we both approached trust. Neither of us became cynical or paranoid, which would have been Jennifer's final victory. Instead, we learned to balance openness with appropriate caution, to trust gradually rather than completely, or not at all. "Mom," Thomas said to me on the anniversary of his hospital admission, now a date we acknowledged rather than avoided, "I want to thank you for never saying, 'I told you so,' for standing by me even when I pushed you away. That's what unconditional love means," I told him. "It's not about never making mistakes or never hurting each other. It's about being there afterward, helping pick up the pieces." Thomas's foundation grew, helping hundreds of fraud victims rebuild their lives and their sense of self-worth. He became an advocate for stronger legal protections and education about sophisticated romance scams. The shell-shocked, defeated man who had come home from the hospital transformed into a confident, compassionate leader who used his painful experience to help others. I, too, found new purpose. Speaking at senior centers about protecting oneself and loved ones from fraud, emphasizing that falling victim to such schemes wasn't a matter of intelligence, but of emotional vulnerability that anyone could experience. As for Jennifer, or Melissa as her true identity proved to be, we gradually stopped following news about her case. Her power over our family diminished with each passing month, until she became simply a painful chapter in our history rather than a defining presence in our lives. The most important wisdom I gained through this ordeal was about the delicate balance between love and discernment. Love wants to believe the best about people, to trust without reservation, to welcome with open arms. But wisdom understands that true love must include discernment, the courage to see red flags, and the strength to act on concerns even when it's uncomfortable. This balance applies to all relationships in life, whether with partners, friends, or family members. The willingness to see people clearly, with both their virtues and their flaws, is not cynicism but a deeper, more authentic form of love than blind acceptance. Thomas eventually married Sophia in a small, joyful ceremony 3 years after the Jennifer ordeal. As I watched them exchange vows, I saw in both their eyes the kind of clear-sighted love that can only come after facing life's painful truths and choosing to remain open despite them. Have you ever had to navigate between protecting someone you love and respecting their independence? It's one of life's most difficult balances to find. If this story resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found value in hearing about our experience, please consider subscribing and sharing this video with someone who might benefit from these lessons. Thank you for listening to my story today, and remember, true wisdom often comes at a cost, but it's always worth the journey.